This episode of Political Radar is brought to you by ReleaseWire.
Admiral, radar shows that we have liberals approaching at 3 o'clock, and libertarians at 9 o'clock, and conservatives at 6 o'clock. They're coming from every angle, every viewpoint.
Oh, it's Political Radar with your hosts, Rhonda and Eliot.
Hey, all you political junkies, welcome to Political Radar, the best 30 minutes of unscripted, uncensored political talk you will hear all day. This is episode number 20. This is a big episode for us because, 20 episodes, Eliot, that's a lot.
Yeah, I think you always say like 2021. Do you have troubles with numbers?
No, I just like to say it 20.
20.
A little more dramatic.
20, is it?
Yeah, I
maybe
think so.
it is.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump right into things with our special guest, Mr. Frank Lasee. Hi, Frank.
Hello, how are you?
Spectacular. Beautiful day today.
Beautiful. Thanks for everyone out there listening.
Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. You're running for the 8th Congressional District.
That is correct. That district goes from Door County, Kewaunee County, down to Calumet, out to Wapaka, includes Appleton and Green Bay, and up to Marinette, Shawano, Oconto counties, Menominee County. So it's a fairly big area, about 750,000 people.
It's like 11 counties, right?
Something like that, yes.
It's a lot. How are you going to reach all those people?
We're doing our best to get out there and talk to them. I've gone to a lot of different events with different people, and me personally, I have folks who are helping me and dropping literature, and we are going to have, we just started our TV advertising this week, and the outreach of telling a little bit more about me, what I'd like to do, and then always just being out there.
Why are you running?
I'd like to work on our nation's problems. We have some real problems. I'm a problem solver. I like and enjoy solving problems. My wife and I, we have a bunch of kids. We're a blended family. We each bring 3 daughters, so we have six daughters and a 3-year-old son. And when you have kids, and I started in politics before I had kids, but when you have kids, it really starts to focus things. I think we have a great country. I don't think it's as great as it once was. I feel like we're headed in the wrong direction, and I'd like to participate and try to turn it around.
But do you want to make America great again like Donald Trump does?
I think we haven't focused enough on the middle class and on America. In some respects, America first. We are overspending at a tremendous clip, and no one's talking about that at all anymore. I'm very concerned. We have $19 trillion in national debt and growing, and I'm very concerned what will happen when it's 30, 40, 50 trillion, and if we aren't going to stop overspending, it will get there. And at some point, the interest on that will crowd everything out, or we'll have hyperinflation, which will harm a whole bunch of folks. So I'm concerned more so for the future and going forward, where we're going to end up, where we're going to be as a country. I think we do need to pay more attention to the Americans that are here, to the people, our countrymen, everyone here. And when you're overspending, I look at things like taking refugees from the Middle East. We're spending $20,000 to $30,000 a person to bring them here. Then factually, about 80 to 90% of them are on welfare 5 and 10 years out. So we continue to bring people over. That's generous. That's nice. But we really can't afford it. And so I look at a lot of the things through the lens of, hey, first we need to balance our budget, stop the overspending, and then you can be generous with your time and your money.
How about that corporate welfare? That's pretty high as well.
Well, corporate welfare depends on how you look at it. I don't think there should be any payments from the federal government, and there's crony capitalists. That's part of the Republican establishment, which I've been fighting for many years. I think we should have a level playing field where everyone knows the rules and can compete fairly, and not have government laws, whether it's at the federal level or the state level, that tip the scales for one industry, one group, those that are already big and are already there in an industry, keeping the startups out, keeping the underground out. Those things are wrong, and those are things that I fight against, because they need to be fought against, because they're still going on strong. Both parties have this this establishment mentality that our government's here to help one group of people we like better than another group of people we don't like as much, and I don't think that's right. I think we should have a fair set of laws all the way across.
So you really definitely have some concerns, and you've voiced them. Your opponent actually did very similar thing, and your opponent, Mike Gallagher, he let us know what he thought was wrong with the country, what he feels should change. But what he did say was, I'm really ready to bring some ideas to the table about what should happen. And then we asked him to be specific, and he really didn't give us anything specific. Do you have any specific ideas to combat everything you just said to us?
Yes, actually I do, and that's what I've done in my working in the state level as a state senator, and before that in the state assembly. Had a couple of years off in between, but I'm very much of a problem solver and working to get from where we are to where we have to go. I recognize the fact is, as a congressman, I'd be one of 435. I'd be in a majority, hopefully a majority, because you can get a lot more done in the majority, of 230, 240 different people that you have to work with in order to get things passed through that House. You have to get it passed through the Senate, and then you have to have the president sign it into law. So I have very specific ideas. I have commitments, and actually that's an observation I've known of my young opponent who's 32 and has really grown up and spent his whole entire adult life outside of Wisconsin on the East Coast and in Washington, D.C. He doesn't talk about that much. Says he has fresh ideas, but they don't ever really come out. Number one is commitment is because I believe that the overspending problem is the biggest problem we face, is the number one rule of digging holes. If you don't want it deeper, is to stop digging. So I commit to folks here that I will not vote to expand the overall federal government spending, at the top of the line, the whole government budget, the federal budget. It should not grow anymore, period. Then we can have our economy continue to grow, hopefully, knock on wood, and then we will have more revenues sometime in the future. That does mean that if you want to spend more on one project, like they're talking about the Zika virus right now, Congress, our Republican Congress, is saying, this is terrible. We need to spend $600 million. The president said $1.9 billion. And hey, where's the money coming from? And I'm going to be that voice regularly. Where's the money coming from? Do you want to raise another tax to pay for that, or what else do you want to cut?
Well, we know who has the money, though. So we know who has the money out there. We just aren't asking them for the money. So that is a problem as well.
Well, that's kind of one of the parts of the tax the rich, take more from the rich. The fact is when we are spending $540 billion more than we're taking in. And if we went out and just took that all, just to balance our budget for 1 year, and took all of that from rich folks, it couldn't quite be enough, and then they wouldn't have that money to spend in the economy. I mean, they pay, rich folks, I'm not one of them, they pay for airplane pilots, they pay for all kinds of stuff, the fuel, and all this stuff goes through the economy. And, people to take care of their houses or multiple houses, all those sort of things go through the economy. So I don't think it's as simple as, hey, let's just go take some more from the rich people. I mean, it doesn't really work that way. It is a spending problem in my mind. And it's a difficult problem. And there's not many people in Congress or out, who really want to address it. But number one is stop digging. Number two is start to go through. I served in Wisconsin here on the Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Commission. The governor put that into place. Asked me to serve on it because of my interest in that area. I've done this for years. And we found $400 million of savings here in Wisconsin. And much of that is annual savings, so it goes on and it compounds over a number of years because we're not spending it. That gave us the ability to cut some taxes, balance our budget here.
But what's interesting about that, though, as you're talking, I'm remembering there's a lot of discussion about balancing the budget, but we were in the deficit pretty significantly under Republican leadership. And that was actually with Republicans being in charge as well. With the Republican governor.
Yeah, that bothered me a lot.
So how does that work? I mean, you have these ideas and you've served in Wisconsin, but it's been pretty ugly for a while here with Republican leadership. So how can we expect that will change if you go to Washington?
I think our current budget is actually very good. I mean, we have a first time in many years, actually we've never had one, $125 million in a rainy day fund. We put some things away. We're borrowing a bit less. I'd like to see us borrow less. But our budget is healthy. I mean, we're one of the few states that has a fully funded retirement system. We're still spending above the national average on our school system. We are still a high-tax state. I mean, we are a high-tax state. We cut our taxes by $4 billion over the last few years, but we're still in the top 10 highest tax states in the country. We have a lot of government services here. But I think we've done pretty well in our state in balancing our budgets, living within our means. The fastest growing, and as Republicans, we never get any credit for this, but the fastest growing area of our state budget, and it's growing by 10 to 14% year over year. And that means that the budget will double for this.
Can we fact check
every
that?
few years?
Are we allowed
Absolutely.
to fact check that?
Absolutely should.
Okay.
Medicaid has been growing by 10 to 14% a year over year, and it continues to. So it crowds out spending on everything else. We got to keep feeding that. And that's without adding new people to it. That's without things. And Medicaid is the government insurance for poor people. I mean, they get free medical care. We all pay for it. Half the births in Wisconsin, about 50,000 births, are paid for by Medicaid. So we have a generous system here in Wisconsin. Going back to the federal government, we have doubled our $19 trillion debt in the last 7 years. You're correct. We have run up some of our national debt with Republicans. Republicans are the only party that are going to talk about spending less. I mean, the Democrats, and you looked at this last, through our election cycle now, and you got Bernie Sanders saying, hey, let's give everybody free college. Well, that's really nice, but when you're spending $500 billion more than you're taking in, I don't know that you can afford to be nice. I mean, we need to balance that budget. I'm very concerned what is going to happen someday in the future when, like anyone who overspends, at some point your creditors cut you off.
So we've talked a lot about money, clearly. Let's talk at another, I guess.
I want to talk about money yet.
Okay, but we've got 15 minutes, and we need to get to something that's really, it's
Well,
basically.
you had your 15 minutes.
I'm gonna get 5 more, and then you can take it all.
Wow, you're so generous.
Your opponent,
fair.
your opponent, Mike Gallagher. Actually, we were discussing. Obviously, a really hot topic right now is national security, gun legislation. The NRA always drives that bus. So he actually said on the podcast when he was on that we should be concerned about what the NRA thinks about what the NRA is thinking about legislation that's on the table. Why do we care what they think when it comes to our national security? Why should we care? Why should we spend any time even discussing what they feel? I mean, we know why, because they're lining pockets of people, but really and truly, why?
The Second Amendment, if you look at history, and I was a history major in college, and I like to read history. I'm interested in history, and if you don't look at your history, you're often doomed to repeat it. And every country in the world, and actually by our standards of more than 200 years, we're actually a fairly old country. Every country in the world has at some point had their government turn on their people. At some point, the government and the people who run the government take over, no longer you get a tyranny. And the thing that prevents
you can't really believe that, actually.
Actually, it's factually.
But in
it's
2016, do you really think that's going to happen?
No, what happens is when a country decides to do this, they disarm their populace. And then the people have no way to defend themselves. So that's why our founding fathers, who were very smart and gave a lot of talk to this and a lot of into it, put in the Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment. And people forget. They think, well, that's about just protecting yourself from bad people because you can't have a cop on every corner. It isn't. It's also about protecting yourself from your government. And also, we don't think about it, but protecting our country from foreign invaders. It'd be very hard to invade our country because so many people own weapons and so many people, regular folks, could defend themselves. Most countries in the world don't have that. So that's why I believe very much in the Second Amendment. I believe very much that we should be, for those who want to be armed, should be able to be armed. And I think it's an important right that we have by our Constitution. Factually, take a look, and you can fact check it. Switzerland is one of the most peaceful countries in the world. And every Swiss male, unless they're a conscientious objector, between the ages of 18 and 55, is in the military there, and they all have guns, and they all have guns in their house.
So you just said something really interesting.
They have very low
They're all in the
levels.
military. They're all in the military. So that's a very big difference.
Well, they all have guns, but the point is they all have guns in their house, and it's very safe. So if
you just said they're
you're
all in
kind
the
of
military.
underlying, but your underlying assumption is very different from mine. Your kind of underlying assumption, I think, is that guns kill people. And just like pencils cause misspelling, I don't think the pencils cause misspelling. It's the user that does that. And there's, I think, a very naive idea out there that the left has that, hey, if we just disarmed everybody, somehow, even those criminals would give up their guns, we would be okay and very safe. Well, no, we really wouldn't, because criminals don't follow the laws.
Well, what does it have to do with the NRA? I guess my question to you was, why should we care what the NRA thinks when it comes to gun safety legislation? Because do you agree we need some safety legislation? We can't just.
I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me one piece of legislation that would have stopped any of the things out there that they claim to? One piece of legislation that would have put a stop to what happened in Miami. One piece of legislation. This always happens. And then when a Muslim extremist does something, the left says, "Hey, wait a minute. We can't paint all Muslims that way. That's just one individual actor." Well, that actor who happens to be a Muslim happens to use guns, and we have others. They could use a bomb. They could blow things up. They could burn things. They can run people over with cars. They could use a chainsaw. There's all kinds of different ways of people being killed, and factually check the facts.
So you don't
they are.
support the terror, like the terror watch legislation? You don't support that?
Well, what's the underlying rub of that is I don't want the government putting anybody on the list without due process. And that is the underlying problem.
I
think if
heard
they sent you
recently
a
that
notice,
you can actually be put on the list, and then you get a certain amount of time to actually appeal that. Is that true?
actually right now you're put on the list and you don't find out until you can't fly. They don't send you.
So
They don't
there's no
send.
time?
There's no letter that says, "Hey, guess what? You're on the list." When you go to the airport, you're going to have a problem. When you're going to go buy a gun, well, it's not there for the gun, but you're going to have a problem. There's no letter that goes out. There's no call. There's nothing. You just get on the list and then you go to travel. You can't travel. That's the underlying problem with this. So you're saying this list that you can't even peruse, that you can't get to, fact check it, exists out there, and then, well, that now you can't. Now, I would be a lot more comfortable with that list, and most of them are foreigners, so I'm much more comfortable with that because I do think that our law should apply. Foreigners who are in this country are guests. They aren't citizens. There's a difference in my mind between citizens and guests. But we should have due process.
If
we had due process with that first,
happen though? Are we literally having where people? Are you hearing? Wow, I went to fly to the Bahamas, and man, I couldn't get on the airplane because I'm on the terror watch list.
Actually,
there
are journalists, and there's actually a congressman who's on that list. So yeah, the congressman has had a problem.
Which congressman is on that list?
I don't remember his name.
But you know there's one on there?
Yeah, that happened.
Absolutely.
That was a thing.
It was on the news.
We'll put it in the notes.
Put it in the notes. I'd love to hear.
Please
Okay,
do.
Eliot, you get it.
So,
Rest,
but to your point is, and on that no-fly list, no purchase gun list, I'm fine with it if there's due process and you send a letter. If there's a letter sent out and saying, hey, you've got a month to appeal, you've got a time to appeal this, but need to appeal it, or you can do it. We suspect you of various things. Prove you're not. I would be much more comfortable with it then. In fact, then I could see that. That would be.
But
fine.
actually, my point was, why do we care what the NRA thinks about gun legislation, which I didn't hear an answer to?
Well, it's kind of like I'm also pro-life, and I care what the right to life thinks about it because they're the premier organization that looks out for that particular issue. They are just as any other lobbying group, any other special interest group is looking out for their special interests, and we're all special interests. I mean, there are family organizations, there are social service organizations, there are advocates for all kinds of different people, and that's great. You listen to the advocates who are in that area, and as a legislator, I've done that a lot, and we work with them, and they're a tenant. I've done a lot of work in landlord-tenant law. I'm chair of insurance and housing in the state, and there are tenant organizations that represent tenants of a variety of types, very liberal ones and very pragmatic ones, and we work with them when we work through legislation. I would suggest to you it's part of the process because they have a narrow, specific interest, and that's why I think they look out and protect our Second Amendment rights, and I believe in the Second Amendment rights.
So what about Sandy Hook? What about Dallas?
Well, and that's why I asked the question is, there's always, well, we've got to do something. And you say, well, do what? And then there's like, well, you got to control this, you got to control that. We want this no-call list. Well, the fact is the guy down in Miami, he was on the list but taken off the list. So doing what they're talking about with the list wouldn't have prevented that. Nothing, I think, would have prevented
Maybe
Sandy
they could have
Hook.
kept him on the list. Who was responsible for taking him off?
Well, I don't know.
Maybe the list
He
should be
wasn't
a
on
little
it.
bit more stringent. Maybe it should be a little
Well,
bit
let's
more.
do that. How about we do that first?
Why don't we start with everyone on the list, and then we'll have you prove that you should get off?
I
mean,
think
wait
I
a
would go
minute.
for anything that would actually create a change in the positive, because I'm not seeing that anything is happening that's positive.
Well, unfortunately, reality is, I believe, is with a country of 300 plus million people, we are going to see a few crazies from time to time. And we see this all around the world. And even in a country like France that has very stringent, very, very stringent gun laws, we saw some terrible terrorist events there with assault rifles and all the bad stuff and bombs. And we're going to see this stuff. And it's just reality. And it's sad.
So
It's unfortunate.
we should accept it.
Not accept it. We should continue to work against it. And I know we prevent those things as much as we can. But the fact is we're going to have those going forward. I wish we lived in a peaceful world.
Well, what about
I wish there weren't
Australia?
extremists. I wish there weren't bad people.
What about Australia?
What about Australia?
Well, everybody talks about how Australia got rid of all the guns.
And it didn't improve their situation, actually.
What are their numbers for gun deaths every year?
I haven't reviewed it recently.
I
but you
haven't.
should
It's
take a look at
actually
it.
I have. It's definitely not even close to what we have here. We are a
Actually,
big hot mess here.
actually, here in the United States, if you took the inner cities out, and we can't talk about this, and folks of color, if you took the violence of inner city Chicago and Milwaukee out of our picture, and Los Angeles and the other ones, we have very low rates, very comparable to a European nation or Australia.
Okay,
You should take a look at it.
So we can't take away their guns in Milwaukee and Los Angeles. So what do we do?
Great question. I don't know. Great question. If I had an answer, I mean, lots of people would love to have that answer.
Okay.
I mean, I remember when Ross Perot was running, and he said, "Oh, my answer to that is we'll cordon off the neighborhoods and we'll go house to house searches and body searches and take away all their guns." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, where's a free nation on that? When are they coming to our community? When are they coming to my house?" I mean, that's not the way America works, and that's the underlying rub. I mean, that's some of the problem we have here in this country.
Did the NRA donate to your campaign?
I don't know. The NRA does not directly donate, as far as I know, to campaigns.
They don't?
No, but I should have an A rating. I have an A rating with the NRA.
Congressional campaigns, they don't?
Not directly, from what I understand, and maybe they do, but I don't
Wow,
think I've gotten
okay.
anything. But I have an A rating with the NRA. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm happy with that.
How do you get a rating of an A? What do you have to do to get that rating?
You fill out a questionnaire if you answer it right, and then they look at your voting record as you go forward. I voted for concealed carry. I think it's a good law. I have a concealed carry permit. I don't use it. I don't carry. But
Do you have to go to a class for that?
yes, you do. You have to
So,
take a
so you
class.
had to be educated like a military person?
Well, not like a military person. That takes a lot more time. But yeah, you have to get a class in education, as you should. I think
Which is
that's
interesting
reasonable.
because you can still buy a military weapon even though you haven't had the training of a military person. That's interesting, isn't it?
Not particularly.
You think
No.
that's okay?
I think it's okay.
So Patriot Act.
Yeah.
You said you mentioned that Ross Perot wanted to go door to door. That made me think, sort of like the Patriot Act.
It's a little bit. Hopefully they've cleaned that up, and it isn't a general. I used to ask people. It's kind of interesting. I used to ask a question to groups of people when I was in front of them. When this was kind of, it was a few years ago, but it was interesting to me that you write an email. They accuse you of a crime. Somehow through the internet, you can go out and grab all your emails for all time, and they can use them against you in court. I would say, okay, well, how many think that's okay? And 9 out of 10 people say that's just fine. I said, okay, well, we have the technology to record all of our telephone conversations, and then if they accuse you of a crime, we could go back and listen to all your telephone conversation. They could use that against you in court. How do you feel about that? 9 out of 10 people say, no way, not my telephone conversations.
Right.
To my mind, they're kind of the same thing there. It's a little interesting because we have the technology, and how you use it is really important. What you do with it and the freedoms that we enjoy, and the non-big brother looking over your shoulder is a strong concern of mine. And that's the trade-off on safety, peace, catching these bad people before they act, and how that balance, that tension there is an ongoing thing. And I've dealt with a lot of these various issues, and some of the world's problems are unfortunately they need to be worked on, but they don't necessarily have a solve. You aren't going to solve them. I mean, these have been around for.
Can we attempt
long,
it
long
though? I
times.
mean, I don't know why we should lay down and roll over. I think we should attempt something.
Well,
Don't
I think
you?
that's, and I've asked you, and you haven't come up with anything, and you're someone who does research. What single piece of legislation would have prevented any of the things that you're talking about, any of the bad actions that you've talked about? And I've always heard zero. We need to do this. Well, if we didn't let people on the list buy guns, it wouldn't have prevented any of these things.
We don't know that though because
Well, we do know that
he wasn't-
factually.
No, because he wasn't actually kept on the list. If he
Well,
would have been kept on the list,
Because he wasn't on the list. That's what I'm
he
talking
was
about.
initially on the list.
Right.
And why did they take him off?
I don't know.
That's
Good
a
question.
failure.
So
I
we
mean,
should
I
fix
think
the
that's
law.
Well,
a
I think
failure.
probably because Obama has said you can't target Muslims. That's what I think. And Obama has put down through his agencies that you got to do everything and bend over backwards so it doesn't even appear that we're targeting Muslims. I think we do have a radical Muslim problem here, that there are some, not all
You're
Muslims
not sure
at
why
all,
he was
but
taken
some.
off the list. See, now if I was running for Congress and I was going to be making some pretty significant decisions for my country, I would find out answers to those questions.
Well, I could spend all my time researching, and then I wouldn't have any time to meet voters and do all the other things that it takes to run for Congress.
Well, as a person who's possibly going to represent my state, I would love for you to find that answer for me. Because I think it's an interesting question. When someone's on the list and then, oh, they're not on anymore. Why is that?
There are lots of interesting questions, and you got to have the discipline to stay on
That
things
list
that are
is like
important.
2 million people.
So why don't we talk about something else?
Yeah, money. So the federal budget is mostly made up of military spending and entitlements. So what can you actually cut? What can actually go?
It's one part of it is fraud, waste, and abuse. One big part of it is, and then the other part is we need to get down and really do that. That's why I say
fraud,
that's
waste,
why I
and
say
abuse in military and
and all across the board.
Okay.
There are multi-billions. Is that going to solve our $500 billion overspending habit this year? No, it's not. That's why I suggest we have to cap the overall budget and then do the hard work underneath that overall cap to cut back wherever we have to. I mean, we just have to, and it's not easy. Having done this and been through tight budgets in the past at the state level, you start to look under every rock and you find all kinds of things. There's tremendous amount of duplication within the federal government. There are a variety of different things that we do. 10 to 15% of our local school budgets, hence the bathroom rule coming from the federal government is from the federal government. I don't think the federal government should be supporting our local schools. I think that should be a state and local issue. I think we should pay for it, and I think the federal government should butt out. That's an interesting answer. How would I do that? I'd freeze all of what we're sending to all the schools across the whole country. There are 424 in Wisconsin, and then cut it back 10% a year for 10 years.
So your opponent
I think
actually
we need to do
believes
these things.
that Mike Gallagher believes that if the budget is not balanced in Washington, that Congress should not get paid. I actually don't think that's even possible, but what do you feel about that? Do you think that's true? If you don't balance it, should you get paid?
I think Mike Gallagher is doing a nice job of pandering to voters and saying whatever they want in order to get elected, and then we'll go off to Washington to do whatever Mike Gallagher does. I mean, he has been in Washington for 5 years. He has served on Capitol Hill. I don't know if that came out. He worked on a Senate as a Senate staffer. So he's seen this. He's been inside it, but he doesn't talk about it. He says, I'm a fresh face from the outside. Well, he's been in it. Much prefer him to talk about his experiences there. The fact is that we tell me again. I've got off topic now myself.
I'm just curious about the fact that he says that if the balanced budget isn't there, they shouldn't be paid.
Well,
Do you believe that?
Well, it sounds nice. Yeah, why not? But is it going to happen? Do you really think congressmen are going to vote and the president's going to sign it and say, hey, we all don't get paid unless we do a budget, when they haven't done budgets for like 6 years when the Democrats were in control? Do you really believe that's going to happen? Sounds nice, but no, it's not going to happen. I mean, that's nice. So it's a young man pandering to get votes. Sounds great, but yeah, he's just pandering to get votes.
So you don't think that would be a good idea?
Well, I don't know that it would work one way or the other. True. And, is it a real idea? So some of what I like to do, actually very strongly, what I like to do is live within reality and what's real and work from where we are to where we'd like to be. I mean, the liberals have incrementally gained for decades and decades. I think us conservatives have to incrementally gain for decades to come. And I very much believe in that. I remind my conservative friends who say, we should have more touchdowns. So, mostly we're getting 3 yards and a puff of dust. I mean, 3 yards and 3 yards and 3 yards, and we have to be satisfied and continue picking the ball up and moving it in the right direction. So you say these kind of things, and anybody can say it, and that's one of the things I have a record. I'm proven. I have a conservative record, and I'm proud of it. And I voted that way, and I continue to vote that way, and I won't go squishy in Washington. And it's nice to say, yeah, they won't get paid. Well, really, and then you look at it factually as well. So we don't get paid, or we just pass another crummy budget.
What about if your president
I think
is
we need to
Donald
pass a
Trump? What do
budget.
you think about that? How do you feel about that? Are you a Trump supporter?
Anybody but Hillary. I'm very concerned about Hillary, and I look past the two presidents. I think I think they both are not tremendous candidates. They both have very high negatives. They both have a lot of issues. They have a lot of baggage. It's interesting. That's our choices this time. I think we have a great country that's going to survive either one. I'm more concerned with the Supreme Court justices that are going to be appointed by the next president. There's going to be one for sure. Whether you like it or not, the Senate's not moving until a new president comes in. We have a 4-4 court on the liberal interpretive side and the conservative literal interpreting, reading it exactly as it is, which I favor. Your Second Amendment rights are not so flexible under one regime. And the next president's going to probably appoint 3, and they will probably sit for multi-decades. And I think having a liberal Supreme Court would be a real problem in my mind for a lot of rights and freedoms that we enjoy, and that's why I support Donald Trump.
Are you really convinced that he would not possibly be a little bit more bipartisan once he's elected?
I think we will get more reform and we'll be able to do more reform that our country desperately needs with Donald Trump than we will with Hillary Clinton. I think if we get Hillary Clinton, many of the things that have been going on over the last 7 years, some people really like it, would continue on. I think that the reforms that we'd like to do will not happen. I think with Donald Trump, we'll negotiate. I mean, everything will be a negotiation, but I think we will negotiate, move forward, things
Why
forward.
is that there's really hardly any Republicans that can actually get the words out of their mouth, I support him? Anyone but Hillary is not the same as I support him. Why is that?
He is our nominee, and I do support him.
Okay.
Yeah, he is our nominee, and I do support him because he's better than Hillary. I mean, was he my first choice? He wasn't, but he is now. He's going to be our nominee, and I think he is much better.
But he doesn't want to cut anything. He wants to increase our military. He wants to increase Social Security. He wants to build a wall. How is that sustainable? I mean, or is he just pandering to voters?
Well, I think he may be pandering to voters as well. I mean, and he said he wants to build a wall and have the Mexicans pay for it. Really? I mean, really? I mean, that sounds nice, but okay.
I've yet to hear how that works.
That works. You know, and that's the beauty of being able to run as someone with no record, and you can just kind of say whatever, and then the rubber hits the road. And you raise a great point. I mean, some of unfortunately politics is Americans want more government than they're willing to pay for. And they elect politicians to give it to them. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And both on Republicans and Democrats, both sides. And now nobody's talking about the debt. Why? Because you get to that question, that tough question, what are you going to cut? Well, wait a minute, you're going to cut something I like. I don't like you. And that's some of the underlying rub of this. But I really believe at some point our national debt will not be a benign problem. It'll be a problem that's going to really cause a lot of trouble for our economy.
That's exactly it. And Medicare, Social Security, they're unsustainable. I mean, we're not going to see that. We're in our 40s. We're never going to see any of it. We know that.
And that's unfortunate. Yeah.
So
what are we going to do? Start saving for yourself, as you're struggling in our economy. Save money for yourself, for your future. And that used to be the old way.
Yeah.
The old way, we all moved away from it. But and I've talked to them. I'm out talking to a lot of different people and talking to people whose income is solely Social Security. It's not a great way to live at the end of your life. I mean, it's certainly not. So start saving young.
I would love to know the total of congressional salary, like over a 10-year period of time. How much?
A congressman is paid $175,000 a year.
And how many are there?
There are 435 congressmen and then 100 U.S. senators. Our president is paid $400,000 a year now. CEOs of large companies make a lot more than that. Isn't
that interesting what you just said, though? I mean, so the people that literally are in the grind every day dealing with these issues, right? They're making so much less than corporations. How is that okay?
I don't know. I don't want to get into the whole trying to upset that apple cart to even talk about it. I mean, I think they get paid very well.
We can do that next time.
Yeah. And it's a tough. it is a tough job.
I mean,
it's a tough job going to Washington.
It is,
to do
and
the
the
job
ratio
and try to figure this all
very
out.
interesting to me how people just openly swallow that. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought a lot about it.
We're basically out of time. You have any last thoughts you wanna share?
Well, I'm a proven conservative. I have a strong record in the state Senate of solving problems. I have worked to solve problems and would do the same thing at the federal level. I look at things very pragmatically. I look at how do I get the votes? How do I move things forward? I give new ideas, float the ideas, look to build coalitions. It's what you have to do in order to change things is build coalitions. You need the votes in both houses of the legislature and the president or the governor's signature to move the ball forward. And I very much look to move the ball forward. I view my job is to pull to the right and push back against the left and work with my colleagues to get as much done as we possibly can get done. I've observed over the years that Wisconsin Right to Life has done a good job in their area because they've wanted to make incremental gains and are willing to do that. I've seen other organizations that say, if I can't get it all, I don't want any. And, that doesn't really work that well in the way that the world works in politics. And I understand how it works, and I'd like to put my experience and my know-how and all this time I've learned from people that I've worked with over the years here and solved their problems or tried to solve their problems or worked on them, and take that background experience and put it to use for people here in the congressional district.
When is the primary?
August 9th is the primary. So I'd like to work for you folks. I do view it as a customer service job, constituent service job, but a customer service job. And our nation has some really big problems. I'm very concerned about them. And I'll do just as I've said. I have a history of it. I'm not going to go to Washington and go all squishy on you.
Awesome. So that wraps up Political Radar episode number 20. Thanks, Frank.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for coming on.
If you'd like some show notes on this episode, you can go to politicalradar.com/20. And we're looking for some sponsors and the Political Radar community on Facebook. You should go in there. It's a hilarious, fun time talking about politics, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the things we talked about here with Frank today. Anything else, Rhonda?
No, I think that covers it. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we're out.
If you enjoyed this episode of Political Radar, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. Even better, submit a show review to iTunes or Stitcher. To listen to other episodes of Political Radar, please visit politicalradar.com/episodes. To support our podcast, please visit our sponsors who make the show possible. You can do this by visiting politicalradar.com/sponsors.
Thanks for listening to Political Radar. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. To stay up to date, visit politicalradar.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter.
This episode of Political Radar is brought to you by ReleaseWire. ReleaseWire is a powerful media engagement service connecting businesses to journalists and bloggers. If you need to get the word out about your business, ReleaseWire is an effective and affordable way to reach journalists and bloggers who are truly interested. And we have a special offer for you today. Submit your first on-demand press release with ReleaseWire and save 25% by entering the discount code PoliticalRadar. That's PoliticalRadar. ReleaseWire, from release to results.
Political Radar is a proud member of the Newsmakers Podcast Network, an ever-growing network of podcasts covering a wide range of topics. Check them out at npcn.tv.